It's tough being in that same room with you. Like there's not even enough space for us.
The table's not wide enough.
You can paddle anything. Now, are you going to take off behind the peak? Normally, the pecking order in the lineup is established by the strongest paddlers, period. The problem with a jet ski is that everybody is the 50-mile-an-hour guy. So the guy can be a terrible surfer, but he still goes the same speed as you and me, and we can out-paddle him twice as fast. But
he wants that 70-foot face.
Exactly.
The worst surfer out at Piahi wants the biggest wave of the day.
That's right.
He wants it.
But then he doesn't have the ability, the skill-wise. So you know, we were going, okay, well that's one way you can put the lineup in check. As soon as you go manual, then the skis have to stop.
Part of the fun of paddling, I think, is actually like being on that 3-foot triangle where you can get into the wave.
It's evolution. I mean, I haven't towed as much as you, but I have towed over there a lot. And for me, this is way more of a challenge, way harder from all the elements, because it's almost, like you say, it's not a wave mean to paddle. So that itself tells everything how hard it is. So when you go and you get a bomb, what a feeling.
Jaws, when it's doing its thing, is really perfectly suited for being towed in, riding a little tiny board with foot straps and going as fast as you've ever gone in your life. I mean, you have to understand where I'm coming from, which was when we first went there, I was in a Zodiac towing it with the wind, and then I was on a Wave Runner 3 that only goes 25 miles an hour, and there was no one around.
When you guys brought around tow surfing, and you know, me as a kid, like, catching on to it way late, like, oh wow, and Double D took me and whipped me into a couple at Phantoms. I ended up sticking more to paddle surfing because I realized that people weren't charging as hard as they were in the 60s.
Since the 60s, they've been going out there and doing this on lesser equipment. We did not reinvent the wheel, okay? Guys have been putting their life online for whatever reason. The bottom line is 2 years ago, a camera showed up for the first time at Himalayas, right?
Thanks, Healey.
I'm not pointing fingers, but there was, on a crowded day, there'd be 6 guys out, correct? 2 years later, there's 73 guys out. From that last session that they just had 73 guys out, did the performance level jump?
No.
Thank you.
Progress is not necessarily only in the surfing too, you gotta realize, and that's where people are looking at it going, oh, they're progressing and they're showing the world what these guys are doing.
When you see guys on 70, 80-foot faces or whatever, and they're surfing the wave like it's backdoor or something like that, that probably changes your perspective. And I think when you change people's perspective, that makes you also change. Like that creates a change because now you go, oh, well, that's rideable. Before that was the unrideable. If it was still the only thing that was happening with guys that were at Waimea and they were just doing what they were doing at Waimea since the 60s and that's the only thing that happened, I think that the evolution would be a lot slower.
Like you said, it basically brought the unridden realm into a rideable.
Well, it gives like the kids that are going to go next, like they can see it and be like, oh, he did that. Like you look at a magazine cover and like your wave and Shane's wave, like if I put my thumb over you, I would have said like, oh, no way you could ride that. Like that's a cool looking wave, but I don't think you could ever be in the pocket. Take your thumb off and you're like, oh, they've ridden it. And you're like, okay, I can put myself in that position.
Right, I was actually worried after that last paddle session, like what are we teaching the kids?
They think, oh, you got to be paddling at Jaws, and you got to be paddling at Mavericks, and you got to go ride Chopu when it's doing something that looks like a Martian, and otherwise you're not even doing it. In our lifetime, those were just dreams. When we were all kids, that stuff was still just in the dream world.
A lot of us are focusing on paddle surfing, and the waves that I thought were big when I was 20, they're just, the ones we're riding now seem to be much bigger, so my boards have grown basically, and now I'm riding quads a lot instead of thrusters.
So probably the biggest difference in design, actual equipment, would be fins as compared to surfboards.
Like I've ridden thrusters my whole life, never really rode quads and short boards, pipe boards, tow boards or anything, and then my big paddle boards were all thrusters, and I tried quads for the first time, and it was so much easier to get it on that inside rail.
If you're on the rail, it's all cool, but as soon as you go flat, I feel like, and I don't like that.
That's what
feeling
freaked me out
but I
at
think
first.
it's all about the right configuration.
But here's the beauty of it. You're always, oh boy. So here's the beauty of what you got to realize, and what brought this up was Nathan Fletcher, and he's probably done more for the sport of big wave surfing and fin templates and whatnot, and going to quads and really opening up a lot of our eyes to this. As he said, your rail is actually your fin.
Absolutely.
So therefore, you don't need that big of a skeg, because that's just going to create drag.
Now we're surfing multiple different waves, different conditions that we're understanding which boards work where. And like, what conditions. Where at Mavericks, yeah, you could ride an 11-foot board, but if you're taking off underneath, you don't have to. But when you're pushing it into the size that we are in some of these waves, moving so fast and shifting, Cortez Bank, Pe'ahi, that if you can't catch it, nothing else matters. So you're going to need the volume and find a way to deal with that. And as we were talking about, fin configurations and foils, that a lot of the stuff that we learned from the whole toe-in movement, has been implemented, into the paddle boards.
Look at that 25-footer at Mavericks. Like, if you surf that aggressively and have the right board, you could be able to like pull in, and if it doesn't clamp, or like come up and do a giant hack on it. But like I just don't feel like I could do that on a board that big, especially backhand. Like, it feels like crap.
But I tell you what, you can build a board that is way bigger than you think and make it the loosest thing you've ever ridden. And you can make a little tiny board, and we learned that from towing, that you could make a little tiny board that you couldn't turn. Big wave surfing, paddle surfing is very elemental, and then it comes down to wanting to catch the biggest wave, which all the guys always have. When you guys are out there by yourselves, you are giving it, your heart and soul to ride the biggest wave, get barreled. But with the equipment advances, and again, the understanding of the lineups, and where you can sit, how deep you can taking off underneath the lip, and backdooring sections, that the elemental side of it, of going out there and just going for it, and that love and dedication, and like just desire to ride the biggest waves has never changed.